The traditional reading for the traditional reading for Epiphany Sunday tells the story of the wise men, or magi, coming to visit the Christ child. They have come from a far country, so Christ is revealed to foreigners, not just his own nation. Let us listen to this epiphany from Matthew chapter 2. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out. And there ahead of them went the star, as they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over a place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed by joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Here ends the reading.
The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Amen. Let us bow in prayer. Oh God, out of all the words which are spoken this day, out of all the words which are sung, out of all the words which are heard, may it be your living word that remains with us and gives us life, life eternal here and now and forever. In the name of the Christ and in the power of the Spirit, we make our prayer. And let everyone say, Amen. During the Summer Olympics in Seoul, South Korea a while ago, 2 members of the U.S. Olympic team decided that they wanted to go to church one Sunday morning. Well, the 2 Americans didn't know any Korean, and their taxi driver didn't know any English. And after several unsuccessful attempts at communicating that they wanted the taxi driver to take them to a church somewhere, one of the Americans came up with an idea. He put his hands together to symbolize prayer. And the taxi driver knowingly got a gleam in his eyes and triumphantly took the 2 Americans and deposited them at a municipal swimming pool. Does it sometimes feel on a given Sunday, maybe stuff is going on in your life, maybe stuff is going on in your head or your heart, and you might as well be at the municipal swimming pool compared to being in worship, praying, meditating, singing, listening, worshiping the Christ child, worshiping the Christ? I think we all probably have Sundays like that. Well, today, on this Epiphany Sunday, I want to look at 3 distractions for would-be magi. That's you and me sometimes. Would-be magi. The first distraction for would-be magi is lack of focus. Do we ever, say when we read Matthew's Christmas and Epiphany stories, do we ever get so wrapped up in the star in the east and the Magi and the Magi's gifts that we forget to focus first and foremost on the Christ child? And with Luke's Christmas story, do we ever get so wrapped up in, say, the hay and the straw and the animals in the stable that we forget to focus first and foremost on the Christ child? Lack of focus can be a distraction for us would-be magi. And I think in worship it can happen perhaps particularly when we see worship as entertainment, not encounter. Encounter with God. Entertainment, after all, doesn't ask us to really change our lives. It's so easy to go that route. Entertainment is easier than encounter so often. But encountering God may call us in worship to change an attitude or change a behavior or change a cherished belief that I've got or that you've got. Entertainment doesn't call us to interact, to have relationship with those around us. But encounter with God calls us to be in relationship with those around us in the pew. Calls us to see as our brother, as our sister, every person we come in contact with Monday through Saturday, because worship on Sundays gets extended into the rest of the week. Worship on Sundays is really dress rehearsal for worshiping God 24/7. Now don't get me wrong. Just because worship is not entertainment does not mean that we cannot use all the arts in worship. Video, film, sculpture, drama, fabric arts, different kinds of music, classical music, rock music, jazz music, blues music, folk music. All of these are arts that we've created as co-creators with God. And you and I know that these arts mean the most in worship when they point us to God, when they point us to encounter with God, rather than pointing us to themselves as arts. Now, I didn't tell Jerry or Jennifer that I was going to say this today, but I so appreciate how our music director, Jerry Salitras, and our director of music for children and youth, Jennifer Cadwell, are always reminding our musical groups that you are worship leaders. You are worship leaders. You are not primarily performers, as important as that is. You lead the people of God in worship through music, in our laments, in our prayers, in our praises, in our meditations. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yes, the first distraction for would-be magi is lack of focus. Let us learn together, day by day, week by week, to keep our focus on the Christ child. A second distraction for would-be magi is what I call the comparison game. It's where you come to Matthew's Epiphany story and you say, I'm not as exotic or as educated or as rich as the Magi were. I guess I don't really count. Or it's where you come to Luke's Christmas story and you say to yourself, I'm not as mystical as Mary was. Or I'm not as practical as Joseph the carpenter was, so I guess I don't count. But you know, God hasn't made us to be the same. The church is meant to be a rainbow of colors, a rainbow of personalities, a rainbow of talents and interests and passions, all carrying help and healing to the hurting in our world. And so, as we think about that a distraction for would-be magi is that we can get into the comparison game. I think it's important to note this because when we get into comparing ourselves with other people 24/7, whenever that pops up, it might take us away from bringing our real self to following Christ. It might keep us from bringing our real self, from worshiping the Christ child, worshiping the Christ. And so, as we think about that, let me just remind myself of where I am at. Sometimes I get so into what I'm talking about that my heart stays there and my mind stays there, and then I've got to say, okay, where was I? But God is interested in our real selves, even when the preacher gets spacey. All right? God is interested in our real self, not the trappings that you and I might hide ourselves in. And so, bring your tiredness, your weariness in being up all night with the baby to worship. Bring your deep concern over the teenagers your 16-year-old has started to hang out with. Bring your aspirations, your dreams, your yearnings for more. Bring your sense of accomplishment at school. Bring your sense of accomplishment at work. Bring your delight and your mystification at that new growing edge in your life. Bring your real self. Because Christian spirituality is not just a matter of prayer and meditation during this 1 hour on Sunday morning. It's 24/7. It's the soul at full stretch before God all week long, all day long, and during the night when God can be mysteriously at work also. A second distraction for would-be magi is the comparison game. No. Bring your real self. That will do. Third and finally today, a distraction for would-be magi is when we see another figure visiting the Christ child. Another figure ready to pounce on the Christ child. A figure of fear. A figure named King Herod, who sent the Magi to Bethlehem to find the Christ child, not so that he could come and worship the Christ child, but so that he could eliminate the Christ child as a threat to his throne. And so, fear can be a distraction, and as you know, far more than just a distraction in our lives. We all know what fear is about. Maybe the fear of not finding a job. Maybe the fear of losing a loved one. Maybe the fear of being ridiculed for being who you are, who God has created you to be. Yeah, maybe the fear of that person from another culture or another religion because you haven't gotten to know that person as a person yet. Fear can distract us from truly following this Jesus, from truly worshiping the Christ child in our heart, in our minds. Picture this in closing. Eric Valley is grasping a nylon rope that is strung down alongside a 395-foot cliff in Nepal. Nearby, another man is on a rope ladder, and his name is Mani Lal. And Mani Lal is doing what he's done for years of his life. He is looking for honey in the honeycombs in the Himalayas by the world's largest honeybees. Thousands of bees are swarming around these two men. Mani Lal is used to it. Eric Valley is not. And Eric Valley told the National Geographic magazine afterwards, he said, "There were so many bees, I was afraid I might freak out. I knew that if I did, I would be dead. And so I took a deep breath and relaxed. I knew that it would be better to be stung by bees than to find myself at the bottom of the cliff." And Eric Valley won an award for his photography that day. My friends, with the fears that each of us have in our lives, the fears that we might have as a society, take a deep breath. And like Joseph, leading his family away from murderous King Herod down to Egypt to be refugees in Egypt, like the Magi who were told by God to go home by another road, put one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other in faith. Because we're on this journey together. And we are more than just would-be Magi. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God.